The morning air hung heavy with frost, the kind of cold that seeped into bones and made even the hardiest villagers pause before their hearths. The forest stood motionless under its blanket of snow, every branch, every needle on the ancient pines coated in white. It was the deep winter of the north where the sun barely crested the treetops before retreating, leaving the world in a perpetual twilight blue. Elias shifted the satchel on his shoulder, the rough burlap scraping against his patched coat. He'd been out since first light, his small boots leaving uneven tracks in the fresh powder. The village elders always said winter was the season of patience, when the earth slept and men lived off what little they had stored away. But patience was hard when your stomach growled louder than the wind. A gust rattled the branches above, sending a shower of snow cascading down his collar. Elias shivered, pulling his scarf tighter. It had been his mother's once, the wool worn thin at the edges, but still holding the faint scent of lavender from her drying racks. He'd traded his own mittens for it last winter when her cough kept her bedridden for weeks. The memory made his chest tighten. He shook his head, focusing instead on the faint animal trails he'd learned to follow, the scratch of a squirrel's claws on bark, the delicate imprint of a snow hare's paws. His father had taught him these signs before the coughing sickness took him too. Elias paused, his breath clouding before him. Something felt different. The forest had gone utterly still, no rustle of wings, no creak of burdened branches, just that endless waiting silence. Then he heard it. Not the wind, not the settling of snow, a sound so small it might have been imagined, a whimper, choked and desperate. His pulse quickened. He turned slowly, scanning the white expanse between the trees. There, beneath the skeletal roots of a lightning-split oak, a dark shape trembled. At first he thought it was a shadow, some trick of the fading light. Then it moved. The wolf cub was so small it could have fit in his satchel. Its black fur stood in ragged tufts against the snow, its sides heaving. The trap's rusty teeth had bitten deep into its hind leg, the wound still dripping sluggish red onto the pristine white. Elias's throat closed. He'd seen traps before. The village men set them for foxes and martens, but never like this, never something so young. The cub's head lifted weakly, silver eyes locked onto his wide with pain and something else, defiance. Its lips peeled back in a silent snarl, revealing needle-sharp baby teeth. No sound came out. Elias remembered his father's warnings about wolves, their cunning, their mercilessness, how a cornered wolf would chew off its own leg to escape. But this wasn't some fearsome beast. This was a pup, alone and terrified, its ribs visible beneath its scruffy coat. Snow crunched under his boots as he stepped closer. The cub flinched, a high-pitched whine escaping despite its bared teeth. Up close, the trap looked ancient, its iron teeth crusted with old blood and rust. The kind of forgotten danger that lingered in the woods long after the hunter moved on. Elias's fingers shook as he reached for his belt knife. The cub recoiled, a proper growl rumbling in its chest now. "Shh," Elias murmured, the way he might soothe a skittish goat. "I'm trying to help." The knife's dull edge scraped against the trap's frozen mechanism. His numb fingers slipped, the blade nicking his thumb. He hissed, but kept working, prying at the rusted spring. The cub's breathing came faster, its eyes darting between the trap and Elias's face. With a final metallic shriek, the jaws sprang open. The cub jerked free so fast it tumbled sideways, then scrambled to get its feet under it. Its injured leg buckled immediately, sending it crashing into the snow again. It whined, the sound so pitiful, Elias's chest ached. Without thinking, he shrugged out of his coat and approached, moving as slowly as he would toward a wounded bird. The cub's ears flattened, but it didn't try to flee. Whether from exhaustion or shock, Elias couldn't tell. The coat settled around the trembling body like a second skin. Elias hesitated, then scooped the bundle up, cub and all. It weighed less than a sack of flour. "You're coming with me," he whispered into the matted fur. The walk back to the village took twice as long, with his arms full. The cub didn't struggle, just stared up at him with those uncanny silver eyes, its breath warming the hollow of his throat. The barn door creaked, protest, as Elias shouldered it open. The familiar smells of hay and old leather wrapped around him, comforting, safe. He kicked aside a pile of moldy tack to make space near the back wall, where the stone foundation held the cold at bay. The cub watched silently as Elias fashioned a nest from straw and his own scarf. When he reached to examine its leg, it snapped half-heartedly, but didn't draw blood. The wound was ugly, the skin torn where the trap's teeth had ground together, but the bone seemed intact. Elias chewed a handful of yarrow leaves into a poultice, the bitter green taste flooding his mouth. His mother had taught him this much at least. The cub yelped when he pressed the mash to its leg, but after a moment, the tension bled from its small body. Moonlight filtered through the cracks in the roof as Elias sat back on his heels. The cub had stopped shivering, its breathing slow and even now. Its eyes gleamed in the dim light, watching him with an intelligence that felt older than its small frame. Elias reached out, letting the cub sniff his fingers before gently stroking the space between its ears. The fur was softer than he expected. "You need a name," he murmured. Outside, the wind howled through the village square, rattling the shutters of sleeping houses. But in the barn, wrapped in stolen warmth and the scent of dried herbs, the world felt smaller, safer. The cub's tail thumped once against the straw. "Shadow," Elias decided, and in the dark, something began.
That night, Elias lay awake long after the village slept. Shadow curled against his side in the straw, its warm weight a steady presence. He'd checked the barn thoroughly, no dugout escape routes, no signs the cub had gotten free. The tracks must belong to another wolf, maybe even Shadow's mother. The thought sent an unexpected pang through him. Outside, the wind moaned through the eaves. Shadow's ear twitched at the sound, but it didn't wake. Elias stared at the rafters, watching Moonlight and Shadow chase each other across the beams. The village would keep setting traps. The men would keep hunting. And one day, they'd find his secret. Or worse, Shadow would. His fingers found the cub's ears, scratching gently. Shadow sighed in its sleep, paws twitching like it was running. Elias closed his eyes. He knew what his father would say, knew what the village would do if they found out. But as Shadow's tail thumped contentedly against his leg, Elias made his choice. Some secrets were worth keeping. The smell of burning tallow greeted Elias as he slipped into the cottage. His mother stood at the hearth, stirring a pot of something that smelled more like boiling bark than stew. Her hair, once as dark as his own, hung in graying strands around her sharp face. "There you are," she said without turning. "The Andersons' goat got loose again. They'll want help finding it come morning." Elias nodded, edging toward the ladder to the loft. His empty satchel swung at his side. He'd left the foraged roots with Shadow. A hand caught his sleeve. "You're freezing." His mother's frown deepened as she felt his damp tunic. "Where's your coat?" Elias's mouth went dry. "Left it at the mill. Got warm working." The lie sat bitter on his tongue. His mother studied him for a long moment, her eyes the same storm gray as his own. Then she sighed and reached for the ragged quilt draped over the chair. "Take this then. And don't," a cough racked her thin frame, "don't stay out so late." Up in the loft, Elias pressed his ear to the floorboards until he heard his mother's footsteps retreat to her bed. Only then did he let out the breath he'd been holding. Moonlight painted silver stripes across the straw mattress as he lay staring at the rafters. Somewhere below, the house groaned against the wind. Somewhere beyond that, in the darkness of the barn, a wolf cub slept wrapped in his coat. Elias turned his face into the thin pillow. Tomorrow would bring chores, and hungry neighbors, and the watchful eyes of the village. But for tonight, he hugged the secret to his chest like a stolen ember, warming himself with its glow. Old Man Harkin's voice carried across the village square. "Tracks near the south ridge. Wolf tracks." Elias's grip tightened on the water bucket. "Not just any wolf," Harkin continued, tapping his pipe against the meeting stone. "Big one." And recently, a murmur ran through the gathered men. Elias kept his eyes on the well crank, but his ears strained. "Probably after the sheep," said Anders, the butcher. His meaty hands flexed around his belt axe. "Lost 2 lambs last week." Elias's stomach twisted. Shadow couldn't have. The cub could barely put weight on its leg. And besides, it hadn't left the barn, had it? "Set more traps," Harkin said, "and someone tell the boy to stop wandering the woods alone. Wolves aren't the only danger out there." The bucket slipped from Elias's numb fingers, hitting the well water with a splash that drowned out whatever came next.